Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today's Monday, August 4th, the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Thank you for joining me. Hope you had a wonderful, fantastic, whatever adjective you want to use to describe your weekend. I hope you had it. As of yesterday, we were exactly 4 weeks away from the Gamecocks kicking off the 2025 season in the Affleck kickoff against Virginia Tech in the great city of Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So it's right around the corner. Practice has started. I don't have an update on Rahsul Faison, in case you're wondering, but there is no doubt that is a hot topic of conversation right now. Gamecocks, I think, will breathe easier once the decision comes down, especially if it's a positive decision. If not, there'll be the gnashing of teeth and concern and running back. Then I think. And look, I'll be honest, maybe I'm wrong about the backup running backs. I mean, I get it. Um, there are folks out there that feel like it's Faison or bust, and it's an opinion. So maybe I'm wrong. I've never said that I don't think they need him. Obviously, they do. I think he does things that are a little bit different than the other guys. I think he also fits into Mike Shula. Kind of, if you look at what he did with the Panthers, that type of back, I think really fits in with what Shula likes to do. He's really good in the pass game as well. And like I said, the differentiator with him is he's a proven player as far as elusiveness in the second level. Once you get to the second level of a defense, that guy can make you miss and house it and turn, even with good blocking. You have to have good blocking regardless, but turn a 13-yard gain into a 40-yard gain. So 41. I don't know if that's a word, but yeah, so you need him, but I like the other backs too. I saw it's just the eyeball test because they're photos, but saw a picture of Jawarn Howell. My goodness, he looks really good, listed at about 220 pounds. I've always thought he was very immensely talented. Some people say ball security is an issue because of the fumble in the bowl game, but that's the only time he fumbled. We'll see what happens moving forward. I like Matthew Fuller. I like Isaiah Augustov from Colorado. Obviously, he's an experienced player, and I like Oscar Attaway too, especially if it's the Oscar Attaway that played the last two games of the season. But they need him. Don't get me wrong, but either way, an answer would, I think, certainly help people calm down and maybe get the focus off of it a little bit because South Carolina is getting ready for a season. There's 22 people on the field on offense and defense combined, and there's a lot of good players. But I'm not saying that this isn't important under any circumstances, but it's. I don't want to say distraction because really what fans are focused on should not affect the team. These days, you can't really keep your team away from things like social media and things like that. So everybody's talking about it. I don't think it's going to be a distraction for the ball players, but I think that the fans, you folks like me, we're ready for an answer, man, and can beat up on the NCAA all we want, but as long as they make the right decision in the end, what did it really cost? Anxiety in one practice at the end of the day. So I'm not, it's, it all comes down to like what decision those people in Indianapolis make. But we'll see what happens with that. But like I said, if he's if for whatever reason he's ineligible, number one, it's a travesty. It's it flies in the face of what the NCAA pretends to be about. I've never really thought, judging by their actions, especially some of what they defend in court and their pompous manner in which they go about it. And then they just sit there. I mean, they're like politicians. They just sit there and lie to us. Well, we're all about this. Well, really, you're not. If you look at your actions, and this would be an example of not. So, but right now, as long as they make the right call and deliver some good news, I mean, Sewell obviously needs this in his life. And like I said, if there's any sense of fairness and justice in the world, he'll be eligible. I mean, it's his. But and what gives me pause now is the receiver from North Carolina in 2023. That kid through no fault of his own lost a year at I think North Carolina Central because they canceled football during the pandemic, right? And so that situation should have been open and shut. It was good for the Gamecocks at the time that he wasn't ineligible. That score may have been a little worse if they'd had him. Their receivers certainly in that ball game with Drake May did not have a lot of problems getting open deep at times against the Gamecocks. And you know, but it was good for Carolina, so we kind of reported it that way. But he finally got eligible at the end, or after he sat a few games, which made no sense. But anyway, that's the Faison thing. That's the latest. The latest is there is no latest on that, but I know everybody's talking about it, so I wanted to mention that right off the top. But practice has started, and so far they're not in pads yet. I don't think. I think that's coming soon. Um, so far so good. You have some these early practices. You just sort of look and see physically, who's out there. With no pads too. There's a clip up on our YouTube page though in the YouTube Shorts, and also a full length 1 minute and something of practice footage. Really cool defensive line drills in that footage, and also you get to see Faison and then I think Matt Fuller make a little cut in a cutting drill, and Faison's quick. He's quick, elusive guy. So check that out. But these early practices, it's just like, well, who looks in good shape, who looks a step quicker, that kind of thing. I mean, the pedal hits the metal once the pads come on, and then you get into scrimmages, and they'll be here before you know it. So there's not a lot of, I mean, breaking news, but there is information that comes out of practice, and that's the reason you practice. A lot of the practice time for coaches in college football is especially to evaluate their own team, and they film it and go back and look at the practice film and things like that, and all that good stuff. So I wrote an article during the weekend. It's on thebigspur.com. No membership required. South Carolina had 3 people named to the preseason All SEC by the media at SEC Media Days in Atlanta. Seems like yesterday, but we're going on a month now. And preseason accolades are always nice, but postseason matters. And so my piece was about 10 guys that could make the postseason All SEC team. Because if South Carolina is going to have a good year, they're going to have probably, most likely, more than 3 All SEC members at the end. They do a first, second, and third team, by the way. So you're talking about 66 players on offense and defense, and then specialists. It'd be nice to have. It would kind of calm some folks down if I could gaze to the future and say, "Oh yeah, Mason Love will be All SEC this year at one of the spots." But that's I've kind of got a moratorium on that. 10 days before kickoff, I normally freak out about special teams, and let's just keep that tradition this year. So we'll have a whole special teams episode once we get closer. But yeah, so I mean, it's the top 66. So it ends up being about the top what? Four, blah 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 blah. 40, 20, do the math. Hey, about 80 players. So if you're going to win in the league and do better than last season, which is what the goal is, you normally have those teams that end up playing in Atlanta for the SEC championship or making the playoff or having a good season. They end up with a lot of dudes on there, 5, 6, 7 guys, sometimes double digits. Georgia, so it's great. Georgia and Alabama teams have a lot of players. So who outside of Lenora Sellers, Dylan Stewart, and Jelon Kilgore, who made the team in the preseason, could make it? Now, I want to start with those 3. Absolutely. Sellers and Stewart and Kilgore could be on those all SEC teams. The thing that may hurt Jalen Kilgore is, he had 5 interceptions last year. Is he going to get, and a lot of these teams, postseason, but they'll look at the stats. Oh, okay. Well, this guy had 7 picks and this guy had 3, so we're going to put the 7 pick guy over that. It doesn't matter what scheme they're in, whatever, you know. Dare I say, some people that don't watch a lot of South Carolina football that have a vote, and there are many, may say if Kilgore only has 3 picks, he's had a down year. I don't know. Sometimes interceptions are based on, you can almost not. J.C. Horn, you folks remember him? He was a top 10 NFL pick. This guy didn't have his first pick until 2020, his last year. So sometimes you're shutting your guy down. They're not throwing at you. I see that in high school quite a bit. One team will have the stud corner and he doesn't have hardly any picks, and that's because nobody's throwing over there. They're not. They have coaches. The other team has coaches too, right? And quarterbacks if they're smart. So, yeah. So that may be it for Jalen. With that, it may be a stats thing, but those 3 absolutely have to have really good years for the Gamecocks to get to where they're going. Dylan Stewart seems like he's on a mission. Same with Sellers. Same with Kilgore. So I don't really worry about those guys hardly at all. So there's that. You know, all these lists, and I hope this guy has a good year because I'm really extremely high on him, and he's looked good in practice so far. And uh, gosh, they had a little video, and it's Fred Johnson, where it was the vacation. The guys are out there having it's the official Gamecock football account, Justin King's guys, and all everybody. Some of the players are out there having a vacation, having a good time, chilling at the pool, whatever. And then the player sticks his fist up, balls the video up like a piece of paper and says, "Vacation's over." And it was Fred Johnson. It was a little scary, just to be honest. One of our ex accounts, Twitter accounts, tweeted it was pretty scary. No lie. No lie, dude. That guy's 6'3", 245 pounds and can run. Um, and I think is also a heck of a football player. I mean, he has a chance to be, I mean, he was described in an article on CBS as a freakazoid. And I hope I'm right. I'm going pretty bold here. I think people will know the name Fred Johnson pretty soon, or JR, because he is Fred JR Johnson. So I expect him to start at linebacker. He's a big reason why I feel like with like I said before, with the caveat that you're not replacing a lot of what Demetrius Knight Jr. brought to the table leadership wise and just who he is. He's unique, unicorn type guy on the roster. But I think the linebackers could be better next season. Or this season. We're in this season now, JC, 2025. I just think that maybe some early mistakes happen because they are collectively a young group, but they are definitely talented. And these body types that they have, it's always kind of been. You look at some of the folks that have played linebacker here under Clayton White, starting with like Brad Johnson, Damani Staley back in the day. Pup Howard was a coveted recruit. I know he left. Um, these are bigger linebackers that he likes. What's the difference now, though? The difference is Murphy and Sean Murphy and Justin O and Fred Johnson can all run. They're all 6'3". They're all 230 plus. Johnson's 240, and they can run. Same with freshman Donovan Darden and Tayshawn Austin. They're big guys, but they can run, and that's a big deal. I could care less, really, from my perspective, about having huge linebackers if they can't run. We've seen this before. We've seen slow linebacker play. It makes you limited. It also makes you vulnerable on the perimeter. Um, if your linebacking core overall is slow, it hurts your special teams because the linebackers play a pivotal role in special teams. I think that's what some of these freshman linebackers are going to do. But that's the difference right now. If you want to know why, You look at a 244-pound linebacker, two 231-pound linebackers in there that are big. That some defensive ends would like that size. Uh, what's the difference between that and like the early days? It's speed, and that's freaky. Carolina's got some freaky players now. I mean, it's not it's not all of them have, I guess, the national or regional attention, but and Fred's one of them. But he's young, going into his second year, so it kind of starts with that. Another freaky guy, Michael Smith, the tight end, going into his second year, missed spring. Um, he's got to stay healthy. I'll say that. But when you look at him, he's listed 6'6", 248. Is the type of tight end type of player that Georgia has had through the years at tight end. Not like Bowers, but I think I mentioned that the other day. I need to find a better analogy, but he is or a better comparison. But he's got a lot of ability. With Josh Simon gone, that tight end position is going to be critical, and he's a player that can definitely get it done. I mean, he's got the ability to go do route running wise and all that. What Josh Simon did, different player than Josh. Definitely, Josh is a little more like Jared Cook. This guy is kind of like what Wesley Saunders um, was supposed to be, and whatever happened to Wesley was unfortunate. And Wesley was certainly not in as good a shape sometimes during his career as Michael Smith. But these days, Wesley Saunders, to his credit, did not have the I guess the resources to stay in shape with the nutrition and everything else. Players today tend to be into all that a little bit more too. I was reading the other day, this generation, Gen Z, I guess we're in Gen Z still with the guys that are in college. They're a little bit more, I guess, mindful of things like nutrition and stuff. I don't know. I don't know that for sure, but I did read an article about that and thought it was applicable. But that's kind of Michael Smith. Even going with the Saunders comparison, though, I just don't. I mean, thinking about what he did in high school, thinking about what he did last year, and he started 7 games last season, so he's got some ability, and there'll be probably more balls his way, more opportunity um, as we move in. So definitely could put him on the All SEC type list. Two corners. Brandon Cisse, I've just heard too many good things about him to say otherwise. But Vakari Swain's going to battle him for that starting job, and we all know Vakari Swain's really good. But I think Cisse has a really good shot just because of the feedback I've received. And then Judge Collier, go look. Speaking of photos and the eyeball test, John Whittle was out there shooting practice, and he sent a text to our Big Spur group chat and was like, "Is this Judge Collier? He looks like a defensive end." And he does. I mean, Judge is 201 pounds. That's a freaky athlete, too. And they think he's going to be really, really good. So Carolina could have, and look, on this article, I didn't say all 10 of them were going to make LSEC. It'd be great if they did. So I'm not saying Carolina will have two corners that make all SEC, but I mean, these guys are both very talented, and Vakari Swain's talented too. And then you got Miles Norwood and Jalewis Solomon behind them, two talented guys. This is a very deep group of cornerbacks that Torian Gray and company have. And I was talking to Bill King, the Bill King show used to be on with me. I used to be on with him on Sirius XM. Gosh, it was a segment a while back, and we started talking about and offensive line is kind of like this too. Urban Meyer was talking about a shortage of offensive linemen last year, and my theory is there's plenty of offensive linemen. It's just the blue bloods don't have the depth they once did, and so everybody's panicking. But corners specifically, Bill's talking is like there's not like that many great ones around college football, and really, if you look at it, there's not. I mean, you have good players, but it's not like it used to be at that spot. So, I'd have to go look. I'm sure there's a team in the SEC probably Texas or Georgia that has or Alabama that has, this kind of quality depth at corner and this kind of ability. But Carolina's blessed at that position. So both of those guys are in the hunt, so we say. I mentioned Josiah Thompson too. Josiah, Shane Beamer in his press conference the other day said, he's had a really good summer, adding strength, reshaping, all that. That was the key for him. He's just got to take it up to the next level. I think, true freshman time is over. I mean, Carolina called it and hauled it, so to speak, with him last year. He's got to be more consistently good, and he can be. And, I think that playing all year last year, with the exception of one game, is going to help him. And he's up to about 310, 315 now. Wow, what a group. Another freakazoid, right? Freaky athlete. Josiah Thompson, freshman All SEC last year, freshman All American, for some publications, I believe. But yeah, having a left tackle that is in the hunt for All SEC would not be a bad thing at all. And offensive linemen, I say this a lot. It's it's usually like third year when they really hit their stride, but there are exceptions, and the exceptions are these guys that play as true freshmen. I mean, they end up first to second year kind of making that move. Now, Tree Babalade and Trevon Ball, maybe that wasn't applicable with them, but they kind of brought in some transfer portal guys, and Tree redshirted, um, and they played out of necessity in 2023. So there's yet another example why the 2023 offensive line had no shot or very little shot, and did the best they could, because those are two guys that clearly in hindsight were not ready. Although I thought Tro played well sometimes when he was in there. And I thought Tree obviously had the great game against Georgia, and then got inconsistent from there. And you wear down too. I mean, true freshmen, you're not prepared really to roll in there. I don't even think Tree came in was Tree there last spring? I think he missed the spring. Um, I think Tro did too. I mean, so yeah, you're physically, keep in mind, these aren't cyborgs, they're human beings. So, and as the season went on, that offensive line, freshmen and all, were banged up. I mean, Nick Gargiulo ended up getting drafted, and he was just, I mean, probably 55% by the time it's all said and done. So that line had no chance. But Josiah does. Josiah Thompson does. I think he's very, very good, in terms of being an offensive tackle that can make this team. And Nick Harbor, we got to include Nick. Nick Harbor has the name recognition too. So let's say he goes out there and I'm not predicting this because I don't really know what to expect out of him. I think probably we're looking at another year of incremental improvement. Like I said, I want to see yards after catch, but if he can do that and take that step in those categories, he's got the name recognition and is again freaky enough where I think he could make it. I think he could be in the conversation, especially if he's like, 50, 60 catches, Carolina's clear leading receiver, all that good stuff. I mean, I considered some other guys, I did consider Tree. I don't know, I don't know if Tree starts right now. Not that he's not one of the five best, but I'm trying to kind of wrap my mind around where he's going to start. So who knows with that? Brian Thomas Jr. could have put up some pretty good numbers. I mean, prove on his 4.5 sacks from last year. He was a guy sort of considered. Obviously, if Faison's eligible, maybe there if he got enough touches. Maybe as an all-purpose, because I think Faison catch the ball out of the backfield and make some things happen. Just looking at the film, gut feeling, analyzing some things. So he's a guy that could come in. Sean Murphy, that linebacker. DQ Smith is a player they're high on. Monkel Goodwin, I think the more I hear about him at defensive tackle, the more I think he's really going to take a next step. Will we look back on Monkel Goodwin at D tackle and say, Well, he was ranked appropriately as a recruit as a top 100 guy because he's a third round draft pick or second round draft pick or whatever. Maybe. I mean, I was told Monkel Goodwine talent wise, is fine, and that's the case with Gabe Brownlow Dindy too. Talent wise, you're there, but as we've seen through the years, especially on the defensive line, and this is one of the reasons I don't recommend, as freaky as they are. I've used the term freaky a lot today. Um, don't pay high school defensive tackles, no matter how much you want them, because trust me, you do. You can't NIL wise go $1 million for those guys because, again, they're guys that in high school they're so much bigger and more athletic and just better than everybody else on the field. You could hand them the ball 20 times a game. Like Zach Pickens, remember he played running back for TL Hanna? I mean, you can do that because they're those types that they're tremendously gifted athletes. So the talent's always there. It's always maximizing it. And that's why I like Travian Robertson as the D line coach. I think he's a definite talent maximizer. You don't put together good D lines at Georgia State and Tulane and not be. And his mentor, Brad Lawing, the late great Brad Lawing, certainly was. So how much further can Travian Robertson get Monkel Goodwine? Because if he can, Monkel's going to have a really good year. And he was kind of a forgotten man last season when you talk about you talk about Boogie Huntley rotating in a lot. You talked about Tonka and TJ. That was kind of the top three. DeAndre Jules, when healthy, was in there. So Monkel was kind of the fifth guy, fourth guy when Jules was down. And they kind of, but he made some plays when he was in there. And I think that was good for him because at Alabama, all he did was practice, rarely played. And so can you get the most out of him this year? Obviously, Brownlow Dindy, it's a matter of that same thing, maximizing him for production in game. So I kind of considered those guys as well. Defensive tackle. Speaking of Christian Ingram, the true freshman, John Whittle has an interview with Travian Robertson up on thebigspur.com. It's a members only. So go join. You can use the code the show 50 to get all the camp scoop and inside info and great content and conversation and everything Gamecocks. It's a fun time if you're out there on Twitter and you're kind of sick of the back and forth on that particular app. The Big Spur, the message board, actually it's a little bit better conversation with folks, and it's very informative and entertaining. We have some of the most hilarious posters in the history of the internet on the Big Spur, so check that out. But Whittle's got an article kind of outlining Christian Ingram, and he is not a guy that came in the spring. He was a late addition to the class out of Covington, Georgia. Southern Cal offered him. Kentucky was in the mix. Georgia offered him. 6'6", 315. And I actually saw a clip of him in the spring. He was working out to get ready to come to Carolina. The guy's been working pretty hard. And sometimes players like this that emerge late, they don't really have to go through the de-recruitment process that much. And most of Carolina's guys don't. Shane Beamer does an outstanding. Somebody asked me the other day, what does Shane Beamer bring to the table? They were on the old tired, oh, he's not a coordinator thing. And I'm like, man, that was like 5 years ago. Just I wasn't hearing it then, and I'm not hearing it now. But that's one of the things as a head coach he does. He's very, uh, you know, almost fanatical about assimilation into the program, right? The culture. That's what people talk about when they talk about culture. Because today, with all the transition, if you have a bad culture, number one, you're going to inevitably face more adversity than you should relative to your talent and coaching ability. Number two, when that adversity happens, don't you may not get it back. You may not get your team back, and then you're going to lose players and people are going to be 1 foot out the door. You can't play football that way. So they do a really good job of that. Not saying there's no de-recruitment that goes on everywhere, because recruits are kind of used to being handled with kid gloves and not yelled at. And I mean, here are these people that have kissed my butt for 18 months to 2 years to try to get me to come. And then all of a sudden, boom, welcome to reality. You better hustle. That's called coaching. Now, most of them were coached in high school or whatever, but you have some of that. But Carolina really has less of that than normal. Um, and that's a credit to Shane Beamer. So, but in general, recruiting doctrine philosophy here, late risers tend to have a immense hunger because they haven't always been on the scene. Then they want to continue to prove themselves, and that will be the category Christian Ingram falls into. Now, will he get in the rotation? He's 6'6", 350. I mean, he's built like Javon Kinlaw in a lot of ways. If you want to get right down to it, I don't know, but I know I know adding him to the mix gives even more competition in that room and gives Travian Robertson a potentially other rotation piece on the D tackle at the D tackle spot. Same way with Shed Surratt on offense. They don't rotate on the offensive line, but he's another freshman lineman that's come in and looked really good. Now, Surratt was here in the spring. He was the newcomer of the spring. I still can't rule out him starting. I would put it at like 10%, but if he does, it's because Gamecock fans, it's not, don't use this as an excuse to get on Lonnie Teasley about development or anything like that. If Surratt starts, it's because Surratt is the best player for the spot, and he's good enough to do that, to get to the conversation. Will he? I don't know. I think that the other guys are really good too, but the future is bright for him on the offensive line. So, that's kind of a quick camp look as far as some personnel goes, and a look at the guys that could be the stars this year. And I'll say this in closing. South Carolina did lose a lot of players off last year's team. It is maybe one of the biggest group of future pros to depart the program. The draft numbers, and I expressed disappointment because I was hoping they'd maybe get 8, 9 guys drafted and set the record. They didn't. But then, you got Josh Simon with the Falcons. I think he's going to make it, that kind of thing. It's Torselli Simpkins with New Orleans. Will probably make it. So we'll see who was all on. O'Donnell Fortune. We'll see who's all in camp and making rosters when all is said and done, or performing well in camp. We'll see, but it's not. How do I put this? I think that it's probably time to start trusting Shane Beamer a little bit more, based on what he's done here, because you trusted Steve Spurrier based on what he did at Florida. And I'll reiterate here. There were years under him where South Carolina lost some really good players, and there was no overt concern, about, and there was no focus on that. That's a different time. Everybody knows everything as a communication, and people follow recruiting much closer. And I still think sometimes folks, myself included, we still have in the back of our mind, well, this guy's this star and that star and all that. And, if Shed Surratt was a 5-star player, which he may end up looking back on it, and he was probably maybe a top 10 player in his whole class nationally, I don't think we'd be worried if he was starting. Kind of crazy. Maybe some, though, because people were a little concerned with Josiah Thompson last year. But, I think it's time to just give. I mean, not saying trust. Trust doesn't even apply, really. I think trust is a very personal thing. This is about football. Trust may not be the best word, but maybe giving Beamer the benefit of the doubt that they know what they're doing to replace some of these guys and that some of these players. Because when you look at it on paper, and you don't win games on paper, a lot of these guys are pretty good. Measurables, potential, talent, production. I mean, freakazoidness. I like it. I like the roster. Now, what does that mean as far as wins and losses? I don't know. I don't think Carolina should be just hoping to get to a bowl this year, but winning and losing games. If you watched college football at all last year, you just never know. It's always been that way to a certain extent. But last year, I mean, because you go through a season, yeah, the injuries are huge in the SEC. It's a game of attrition in a lot of ways. And the good news is there's depth on this roster. Um, you kind of look at it and it's impossible to accurately predict. I can't tell you that, they're going to win all these games. I'm just saying that, the personnel is good, especially compared to some past teams. I mean, I don't understand at all why anybody would compare this group to 2014 or 2023. Just looking at the players, because the hope, there's always hope when you replace players, right? We hope Fred Johnson's going to be a stud. We don't know. We won't. We won't know till the games are played. And if he goes out there and screws up in the first game and I look like an idiot and he plays bad, it's still not settled business until, you get further into the year. So that's just the bottom line in football. But it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop a lot of quick evals on that end. But we hope that. We don't know. But that's the case with everybody, So there's a lot of hope, but it's not like some of those years I mentioned where it was a hope and a prayer. I think I looked back at the 14 too deep. Go Google that. 2014 South Carolina Gamecocks depth chart. I found an article after spring. My goodness. No wonder that defense wasn't all that good. And it's no offense to all those guys that went out there and played their ass off for Carolina. I actually think there were games like Independence Bowl and Florida, parts of the Georgia game, East Carolina had a powerful offense, Missouri in the 2014 season where the defense played way above where it should have been. And still, it was, I mean, I I didn't even know what to say. I don't think there was a single guy outside of Sky Moore who was not, and he was a sophomore, that was drafted or whatnot on that team, on that defense that year. This is a completely different animal. I mean, Dylan Stewart and Jalen Kilgore and some of the corners, and I mean those guys alone make it better than that season. It's probably a little more similar to if I'm being honest, the 2012 defense, which in it was good. It was a great defense. I mean, ask the Georgia Bulldogs that year about it, because it's that 2011 defense lost Melvin Ingram and Stephon Gilmore and I believe Antonio Allen. I mean, those were three big time playmakers for the Gamecocks. Gone. And they were fine. Clowney was a sophomore just like Dylan Stewart and became even more of a holy terror and had his best year. And Devin Taylor was on the other side. And you had some good solid guys in the middle of that defense. And the secondary continued to play pretty well. So Jimmy Legree had his best year that year. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see kind of how it all shakes down. DJ Swearinger was in that secondary as well. So don't count him out. But yeah, I think it's time, stop worrying about what Carolina lost and start focusing on some of these players because they've got some talent. Shane Beamer, the head coach of the Gamecocks, speaking of, will be on Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show with JB. That starts at 10. Phil and I will be along with Mad Dog Monday at noon during the Crosstalk and Super Stream. And don't forget Sports Talk tonight on the Chief Sports app with Phil Kornblut. Had a good episode of SEC Sunday Night last night as well, so check that out. This has been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. I'm out. Holla.